Bitcoin getting crushed again. It is now off 16% since hitting all-time highs earlier this month.
But the bank also pointed to tens of billions of pounds in extra savings by households who have not been able to spend, but at some point could be unleashed. Another much-needed shot in the arm.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of Focus on Finance. In today's episode, we'll be taking a look at some of the careers in finance and looking at the range of professional opportunities are available in the field. Joining me in the studio to discuss this topic is Mr. Shahid Ulash, who is an accountant by profession, the managing director of a management company in Mauritius, and the chairman of Mauritius Finance. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, Shafique Sahib. Pleased to be here.
Thank you. So today we're going to look at the range of professional opportunities there are in finance, and it's a wide spectrum. Perhaps let's try and focus on one area first, and then expand it as we go on. We were talking earlier of an example in banking. If someone takes a loan, what types of skill sets are involved in processing that loan?
That's very interesting, Shafique Sahib. If you take a loan, right, someone will need to go to a bank and talk to his relationship manager. So that's one profession that you will see, one touch point. Then that goes to the administrative department who will do numerous checks. So you have KYC specialists, so compliance specialists.
And what is a KYC for
know your client. So basically, whenever you take a loan or do a financial transaction, the financial enterprise, the bank, for example, would need to have basic documentation on you to identify you and understand that you're able to enter into that financial transaction. So to identify you, typically they will take your ID card and they will take a proof of your residential address with typically your utility bill, your water bill, your electricity bill, which basically says where you live. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the ways of identifying you to start with. And then for taking a loan, the bank will need to assess firstly your ability to take the loan and to repay the loan. So they would be doing a credit analysis on you. So they will collect information from you. They will take typically your pay slips, your bank account balance, and they will look at the conduct of the bank account balance. And banks typically have a threshold of 40% of your total income that you can have as a maximum repayment capacity for any person. So they will have to look at that. But we're talking about the jobs that are involved. I mentioned a credit assessment that has to be done by credit analysts. Then basically, there's a risk profile that is created on the person taking the loan. So there's going to be a risk specialist looking at that profile, creating the profile of the person. Once all of this documentation is ready, it goes to the credit committee, who will basically assess whether to give you a loan, and then basically it comes back to the relationship manager informing you that the loan has been approved. So if you look at the process of just getting a loan, you talk about the relationship manager, you talk about the KYC specialist, we talk about the credit analyst and the risk analyst, who basically would be the four people who are preparing the file to get approved by the credit committee. So just one simple financial transaction, we can see on one aspect how that happens. Now let's push it a bit further. Mm-hmm. Down the road, the person is unable to pay his loan. So firstly, they're going to look at a credit recovery. So someone who basically will try to recover the credit and work with the person to refinance the loan, or to reconstruct the loan, or to see how they can extend the term of the loan to allow the person to pay the loan. So that's another profession in itself, the credit recovery. Once, let's say, this goes through and that works, very good for the person is still unable to pay the loan. Then it goes to a different tangent altogether. So they will have a legal person that comes in to basically serve legal papers of that person to ask them to repay the loan. That again doesn't work. They will have to go to court and put that person into some form of a receivership or administration, where they can repossess the asset that was given into guarantee for that loan. Mm-hmm. And very often they would appoint a liquidator to basically take possession of the asset and to sell the asset and to recoup their cash. So just with one loan, when you get the full extent, you still have 3 or 4 professions that get into place. So that's one aspect of finance, one single transaction of finance, taking it from end to end. There are like 7, 8 professions that are involved into the process. So that's just one aspect.
So that's interesting. I think viewers may think that banking may be a profession. You're a banker, but and we're not talking this issuance and servicing of a loan is only one of the functions a bank provides. Exactly. So just looking at one small section of banking, there are 7 or 8 different professions in there that would all be working in finance. So I think we just want to give that as an example of the range, of broad range. So in this one episode, we're not going to be able to cover all the various fields in finance, and within the fields are different professions, but we wanted to just give a high-level overview of the various professions and areas that there are available in finance that may interest people, because I think a lot of people may be thinking they need to be strong on mathematics or be accountants, but they may be surprised at lawyers and even engineers and so on. And the relationship manager, I think, is an important one, where that is more about speaking and being social, if you like, as well as a business person. Absolutely. The relationship manager's role typically is to maintain the relationship, so understand the client and get the client to trust him, to be able to understand the realities of the financial situation of the client, and maybe propose products that may be fit for the client, or advise the client on getting or not getting into a loan, depending on the client's repayment capacity. So there is obviously a duty of responsibility towards the client, but the relationship manager also has a duty and responsibility towards the bank to sell more to his clients. So it's a thin line to tread, and those people are basically people's person who basically have relationship, they maintain relationships and try to grow the business for the banks. So in a way, there are customer-facing bankers, so they're the facing of the banker. So this is one aspect, loans. So we've covered relationship managers, then people who process the loans, so do the assessment. So what kind of skills do they need for that? For the KYC, you were saying? Very often people who do KYC, they are typically either school leavers or degree holders. So it's a process that's given to them. They need to verify documentation and show that they meet certain minimum criteria as prescribed by the law. And that's very much a process-driven type of approach. And typically you would see people at the very start of their careers running processes of that nature. There's a specific qualification you need to have because the training is given on the job. It's a fairly simple job. You just have to follow a process and then you can get the results. Yeah, so it's something you will learn as once you go into the banking profession. Then there is so basically the know your customer will be getting the basic details. Then you said there was a credit analysis. So again, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, that is an extension of the process. So now you're doing you're taking the information and then coming to doing some calculations. Absolutely. So that person will be more a financial type of analyst person, and that person will basically look at the financial data of that person, understand whether the person has the ability to repay, look at the expense pattern of that person if the person has a bank account with them, or they would look at the bank statements for the last 6 to 9 months just to understand the pattern of expenses of that person, to be able to assess whether that person has the ability to take that loan he's asking and then repay that loan. So that's one of the most, I would say, critical processes in giving a loan. Yeah. So to my mind, those are administrative jobs. So you have the customer-facing jobs and you've got the processing administration. Then there was the credit committee, which will make a decision.
Yeah.
So that will be more a managerial. They have more responsibility to approve loans or reject loans depending on the analysis that has been done.
Exactly, and those would be more senior, seasoned bankers. So there would be senior credit analysts. There would be typically the bank manager who runs this committee. You will have risk, legal, and sometimes, depending on the loans that they are giving to, tax aspects also will be also involved into that process. So it's a complete committee that will look at every single aspect of the loan before agreeing to disburse the loan.
Mm-hmm. So this will be a mixture of skill sets. So there'll be more senior, experienced people, banking background, maybe some accounting, maybe some legal background.
Exactly.
And the legal bit is interesting. That seems to, that what you was mentioned, where in the case where there may be a default on the loan and there's a repossession. So I think it's useful, people may not be aware that the legal profession has a place within the finance world.
I think the legal profession is one of the key cogs of any financial transaction. So if you look at any financial transaction, it's always underpinned by legal agreements. Mm-hmm. And the legal agreements, unfortunately, a lot of people who take advantage of financial transactions do not read their legal agreements in details. And very often those legal agreements are set in a certain way that the clients will not see the most important provisions that actually affect their own rights, because the way it's written or the direction is given or the characters it's written, it's not practical for that person to read it. And these are things that a lot of consumer protection agencies have basically made huge outcry about, the way people are given loans without them seeing the real financial liability they're getting into when signing up to loans. Unfortunately, that's the profession of the legal basically department of banks. Their role is to protect the interests of bank at all costs. And they will put whatever is required in terms of legal security in the documents to ensure that they're protecting the interests of the banks. And it is a responsibility of every customer taking a loan to ensure that they understand what they're getting into. Unfortunately, and I emphasize, unfortunately, a lot of the people taking the loans are in need of cash, and they're ready to sign everything and anything to be able to get access to that cash. And they don't realize that the cost of actually taking that cash is so huge that they may end up losing everything at the end. But again, it's a question of having an informed decision, and we definitely advise viewers not against taking loans, but ensuring that they understand very clearly what they're getting into in any financial transaction.
Yes, I think that is very good advice. And whilst we don't give financial advice specifics, I think the general principle, it's something to bear in mind. And that goes for insurance as well, the small print, anything where if a lot of things are being written, and even things like guarantees when you buy electrical equipment, you get a lot of small print that nobody reads, but you're told, yes, you're getting X number of years. But this is a universal problem. And
then you just don't read the exclusion clause, which probably will be longer than the guarantee that you'll be given.
Absolutely. So, the main point we're making is there are different professional avenues for people to get involved in finance, one of them being the legal side. So legal route, law is a way you they do work within finance. In all of this, we haven't talked about accountants. I think the accountancy is a profession we've spoken at length what it does. So in banking, so loan is one thread, one activity that the bank does. So let's just stay with banking for now. What other types of transactions or areas of work are available in banking that have different professionals involved? Perhaps investments.
Exactly. I was going to talk about investments. It's very interesting. So you have basically people who manage assets for their clients and for the banks. So their role is to make money for their clients and make money for the bank. And how they do that is by trying to find investments that basically will increase in value over time. And the way they do that is to look at typical companies. They will make investments into whether it's funds, exchange traded funds, or very liquid funds, basically, which we basically trade on a regular basis, and then they will realize values over time. And they will typically do analysis like, what's the return of the funds over the last 15, 20 years, look at the trends and so on, and ensure that, it's been safe, it's been run in a sound and secure way, and that can provide some decent return over time. Or they may actually be financing projects where they take a share of the returns of that project in terms of what we call carried interest. And they take it on board, and they accompany projects over longer periods of time, typically between 5 and 8 years, with a view to making money where they exit the project. So there are different ways and means of making money for clients and for the banks. And the predominant aspect is to find sound investments to make for the bank and for the clients, and with a view to reaping returns from those investments over a certain period of time. And the skill sets that typically are used are people with financial analysis, financial analysts, you have investment professionals, you have sometimes accountants doing those jobs, you have sometimes people who studied econometrics doing those jobs. So again, this we've had actually very good engineers as very good investment professionals. So it's again a very diverse set of skills, but with very strong analytical skills to be able to understand a certain pattern of numbers and make sense out of it. And once they've understood, they can actually see whether there's a potential of growth in those investments. And we talk about investments. It's a very, very wide gamut of skill sets because there are typically value investments that we just spoke about, but there are also sector-specific investments and specialists in certain sectors who basically develop that skill over time. And those are the people who can tell you, for example, what will be the real estate investment that's going to gain a lot of value and you can make an investment there. What will be the specific project that you can invest into, a hydroelectric power station or solar power plant that you can actually make money out of it. So again, we have the typical value investments that we talk about. So just trying to find value in any investment that you're doing. Plus you have sector-specific specialists who build their skill sets on sectors over time and they sell that skill sets to banks and clients.
So yeah, so it sounds like there are a number of specialist areas within banking when you're looking at the investment function. Our goal today is not to go too much into the details of banking, and just to reassure people, banks do not invest your deposit money in investment funds, but that's perhaps another level of detail that's not relevant. We're looking today at the various opportunities for people thinking about going into finance. Let's move away from banking for now and look at another area which perhaps we haven't covered in earlier programs. You mentioned regulator. For me, regulator will fall into, if banks are private or not government owned, I think the regulator will fall under civil service, government, and that type of area. So public, what we would call public companies, as opposed to private companies. So in the public sector, i.e. government sector, where are there finance-related roles? Perhaps the obvious one would be the Ministry of Finance.
Well, interestingly, if you look at the skill sets that are used in banking, you would expect the similar types of skill sets used at the regulator.
Yes.
It needs to be a sort of a mirror reflection of the skill sets, so that if you have a regulator regulating a bank, you would need to have a lawyer sitting at the bank to be able to understand the legislations and ensure that those legislations are being applied. You will need to have an accountant to understand, to be able to do the financial analysis, to understand the accounts of the banks and ensuring that they're maintaining specific cash balances or what we call liquidity ratios. You would need to have financial analysts who are going to go into detail into the investments that the bank have made and make an independent assessment of whether those investments or the value that the bank is showing in its books represents that actual value, and can recommend the commercial banks to write off certain portion of their loans which they believe has no value. That's the role of a central bank. They may also get into they will not get into the commercial aspect of the bank, but for example, if they're making misrepresentation to their clients, right, they can also enforce upon banks to ensure that they have clear terms and conditions, and those terms and conditions are clearly explained to their clients to ensure that there's no misrepresentation of the conditions and people do understand what they're getting into. So if you look at the regulator, basically, that would be a reflection of what the skill sets you see at the bank, at the commercial bank level. The regulator would have a reflection of the mirror image of the skill sets sitting at there, and also to ensure that they can regulate those banks.
So we're making the point here that if you're a lawyer or any of these professional avenues into finance, it can be both on the commercial side and also on the public side within the government, within the regulator.
Yeah.
But staying with the government side, so the regulator would mirror image the skills that the retail arms. But within the government, there are other aspects of finance. So there is, I think, the Ministry of Finance. In Mauritius, we have a Ministry of Financial Services, which the regulators report into. But in the Ministry of Finance, they will be doing things at a country level.
Absolutely. If you look at the Ministry of Finance, they basically manage the finance of the country, right? They own the budget of the country and they distribute the budget of the country, and they ensure that the country maintains financial discipline. And for that, they need to have basically people with accounting background, with economics background, very strong economics background. They need to have people with a good investment analysis skill sets, very good analytical skill sets to be able to understand, firstly, how the economy is faring, what are the sectors that are moving forward, where the government needs to put its investments, what are the sectors that they need to basically maybe take a step back and let the sectors fend for themselves, and also how to take care of the population and how to take care of the poor people. I think there's a number of functions that the government plays, and in terms of what is going to be the tax policy that they're going to take, what's going to be the impact of a specific tax policy on their tax revenues, and they need to have the people who have the analytical skill sets to be able to advise the minister and the government to be able to take the right policy decision for the country. We've been through a COVID crisis globally, where the world has gone into recession. Now with the major issues happening in Ukraine and Russia, that basically is creating a big, I would say, inflation push in all the major economies. That will trickle down to all countries globally. And we need to realize that we need to have very strong analysts, basically, a very strong policy making to ensure that we can protect the most vulnerable people in the society. And this is where I think when we talk about the professions, the government will have to recruit very bright people and ensure that those people are giving the right advice to the ministers.
No, I've worked a little bit with the ministry here in Mauritius, and indeed there are analysts, and a lot of the work is done forecasting budgets and doing projections. Maybe we can cover the professionals who do that in another program. But we should also remember that the government makes laws, and hence you have the legal team. Again, in a way mirroring what we see with banks, etc., where the legal profession that plays a very important part. And in case of regulations and laws, in Mauritius we have the State Law Office, and within the State Law Office you have people who understand the legal aspects of finance. I just wanted, before we end the program, to perhaps bring it back to something closer to the Islamic system. So I think finance, it works within the Ahmadiyya community as well. We have a Department of Finance, the Secretary Mal. What is interesting is the structure is very well regulated. We have the rules, and you don't need to be an accountant, but you need to follow quite simple principles, which are very clear and very easy to understand. But the structure can be complicated, but the principles are quite clear. What each individual needs to do in terms of contributions, and how the organization needs to spend money that's approved. What's your experience? You've been an auditor for the Jamaat in Mauritius. What's your take on the professional competencies that are required to work within the MAL and auditing and muhasib functions?
Well, when you look at the way the Jamaat has been set up, it's very structured, and there's certainty in the way the Jamaat operates. You will not see things moving day in, day out, or from year on year. There will be some clarifications that come from time again, or some policy decisions that come time and again. But generally speaking, the way the accounting has been done has been going on for a number of years in the same way. And even with the way we present information has been consistent over a large number of years. There may be having some new heads added just to provide clarity. But all in all, if you look at the accounts, let's say 20, 25 years back today, it's basically the same set of data that we produce. And consistently, we've seen that the way it's structured, you look at, there's an income side and there's an expense side. The income side basically is everyone has a responsibility to contribute to the Jamaat based on the specific rates that has been predetermined in our constitution, and ensure that we need to meet those requirements. And on the other side, the expenses is subject to a budget that's approved eventually by Hazur Yanar. And basically, we just need to ensure we remain within the budget, within the framework. And that's as simple as that, right? And then there are a number of more, I would say, finer details that we need to understand. But generally speaking, so long we stay within those two parameters, we are within the realms of the system, the Islamic system that we put for the Jamaat.
Yeah, Jazakallah. I think that is an area perhaps we can cover in another program, how finance works within the Nizam Jamaat. But for today, again, we could continue speaking. We've only been able to look at banking and the government, but it's a vast subject, and unfortunately our time is up. So, Jazakumullah once again for a very enlightened discussion and exposure of these points. And thank you again, dear viewer, and I hope you can join us for the next episode of Focus on Finance. Assalamu alaikum.